Hey there. Thanks very much for checking out my YouTube videos. I do appreciate it. So we're doing a YouTube live, which is on their studio feature. So essentially, this is just a quick little non-scripted, no edits, just a general conversation about what I've been up to with Turo or kind of what my activities have been. So just kind of a little review from that standpoint. So, a little bit about myself. I've been doing Turo now for about 5 months, and the idea is to be able to put together a podcast after this kind of 1 year run or 6 month run on Turo in Canada. Essentially, I'm just doing a work through, kind of get an idea. Is this a good side hustle? Is this a good side business to get into? Um, is it a hobby? At this point, I would have to describe it as more of a hobby than anything else. It's not what I describe as a huge profit driven endeavor. And it's really just kind of, putting your feet in the water and kind of getting a little splash and see what it's all about. So that's the idea behind it. So come up to the fifth month. Well, we're past the fifth month. We're coming close to the 6 months, which means we're coming due for a vehicle inspection, things along that line. I reviewed that in the last little video we did. So once I go do the inspection, I print off a copy. And again, I'm a little hesitant on that one because we're in January. We're coming into February. As far as that's concerned, usually March is when I switch over tires and do the after season run. So my thought is, do I do an inspection 4 weeks before I do tires, or do I just take the vehicle off Turo for 4 to 3 weeks and wait till I want to switch over to my summers or my all season tires? I'm debating that, to be honest with you. Again, I had this discussion on the last video about seasonal timing, and it's an easier way for me to blend in an expense, so I can say, well, I'm going to go in, I'm going to get that inspection done, which is really just a quick little checklist. It's not huge, but if I'm going to go in and have the tires pulled to switch over, they can do the brake check at the same time, so it kind of offsets the cost a little bit. I can change fluids. So in other words, I'm coming due for an oil change. So we can do an oil change at the same time, which involves an inspection of all the other stuff. So it kind of just bleeds into that inspection that Turo's requesting. So I kind of go, well, that would offset that expense. Up in my neck of the woods, most shops are saying, well, it's an hour charge out. So our shop rate here is between $90 and $140 now. So it's an expensive inspection for what is really nothing. So I don't get a certificate at the end to say, hey, I can now use that to sell the vehicle or some added value to it. It doesn't really provide anything because it's really a 9 point or a 10 point inspection. It is annoying from that standpoint, which is why I would want to do that with a seasonal tire change, because I can say, well, the value added in that is the tech has the tires off anyways. I can offset that by the shop by saying, hey, look, I paid for the tires to be removed. I'm doing the oil change anyways. I want a rating on the brakes and do this quick little inspection while you're doing it, because you're going to do that as part of the oil change. And if I go to a quick oil loop center, or I go to a fast serve type of an environment, they do an inspection anyways, which pretty much parallels what Turo wants, right, as far as that's concerned. So again, it's just one of those things where I don't think anyone in Turo has actually sat back with a calendar and went, whoa, in Southern Ontario, we're still running with snow tires in January. Why would they go into a shop at this point unless there was an issue, right? So a little annoyance. So with that said, because I'm a special individual in many ways, I picked up I go to auctions as a bit of a hobby. So this isn't Turo related, but it is kind of Turo related in a roundabout way. So I like to go to auctions to be able to find business equipment or industrial equipment or tools. It's kind of my little forte. And to the most part, I'm a bit of a tool hoarder. So I hang on to everything essentially. And I like to go to auctions because I like to pay, 10 cents or 30 cents on the dollar on a tool, because why wouldn't you? And sometimes they need to be repaired or they need to be refurbished. And I enjoy doing that. So it's a hobby that I like. So I enjoy buying the old Mastercraft tools. I can pretty much refinish them. Um, I like the quality of the tools from the 80s. They're not really a collectible by any stretch of the imagination. So they're one of those things where I can pick them up, add them to my tool bin, It doesn't cost me a ton of money. Things like 3D printers, things along that line, I always seem to pick up at a fairly reasonable cost. It is kind of related to what I do, but not really. It's just a hobby, right? So with that said, I've been going to some government auctions, and I thought, well, you know what? I'm coming up to that 6 month point where I've got to do an inspection on the Outlander. I just sold my Cruise, and I had that for about 2 months, it was a mistaken purchase, but it wasn't a mistake it was a bad vehicle. It was just a mistake in timing, and also qualifying the car properly for Turo. The cost of the car and the expense with insurance didn't match. So one of those things where you looked at it, you went, okay, well, as an exercise, you could probably do it as just a way of kind of saying, okay, I've got a car, but you wouldn't make any real profit off it. Whereas the Outlander, the way the insurance is set up, cost to operate, and kind of where it sits on the price points, there's a little margin there. I'm not talking like millions of dollars, but there's a little bit there to play with. So with that said, I thought, well, I'm going to come up and do essentially a safety check or an inspection, which I'm basically would do a safety check. Maybe it's time to rotate out of the Outlander. So maybe it's time to post that up because it's the seasonal winter. SUVs and things along that line seem to go really well this time of year, and I'd probably get a premium for it from that standpoint. So I've been debating that in the back of my head. And then replacing it with something else. And not necessarily because I have to, but just as a way of saying, okay, let's flavor this up a little bit, because I'm doing these little monthly or weekly quick little YouTube things to be able to build up into a podcast. So I can say, well, here's 12 podcasts or 12 chapters on Turo in the Canadian market. This is my experience and the hurdles that I've gone through. So that's the intent here. So that's why you're getting this really low quality video, but reasonable quality audio. But I'm probably going to bundle this and reshape it and turn it into a podcast. And I'm not doing any editing on this. So it's kind of off the cuff, kind of free flowing, essentially, right? So with that said, because I've been going to some government auctions, and it's just one of those things I do, right? I came across a vehicle, and I thought, well, that's odd. I'm walking around thinking maybe it's time to change up. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So I thought I'd walk through the process of buying a car through a government auction and kind of the hurdles as to why you would do it and why you wouldn't, as far as that's concerned. Because it's one of those things that if you're not car literate or knowledgeable in the marketplace, I don't think it's a advisable thing to do to actually buy a car at an auction. I think it's a really bad idea. I think it's a mix of factors that can cause you to lose a ton of money, a ton of time, and put you behind the 8 ball really quick. So would I recommend this for the average kind of guy that's out there? I would probably say no. I would say go work a deal as a private sale, or go find yourself a nice independent dealer to work with, because really the recourse or the ability to get the vehicle inspected or go for a test drive or just get a feel for how it was treated in the past will help reduce some of those costs that come up in the 3rd month or the 6th month. A good example would be my Outlander. I bought off of a nice gentleman. I think he was in his 60s, maybe 70s. I couldn't tell. He was an older guy, but still very mobile. And they were downsizing into one vehicle, and his driving skills clearly deteriorated to the point where it's just not comfortable driving anymore. But he had a satchel of service records. A local garage was familiar with the vehicle, so I got to talk to the technician. It has some marks from, again, as you get older, you tend to lose track of where things are, and sometimes you'll nudge or you scratch your car a little bit, right? Which is fine. Like, it's one of those things. Those are all cosmetic things that can be easily repaired, but not a big deal. Just things to help bring the price down a little bit. But the structure and the mechanics of the car, and he'd been oil spraying it from new, so everything on the car mechanically was solid. So I didn't have to worry about getting it back and going, oh, I've discovered a head gasket, or oh my goodness, CV boot's torn. Like, it was really just a straightforward deal, which was nice, other than some reconditioning work, right? So if you're out there buying a car, I would say go look at private, and you have to size up who's selling the car along with what the car you're looking at. And you have to narrow it down a fair bit from that standpoint on what you're comfortable with. And going to a private dealer, or not a private, but going to an independent dealer over a franchise is probably advisable for a group of reasons. I might actually do a video on this as far as how to buy a car in the marketplace and what the categories are. And it gets to be a little complicated and convoluted as far as that's concerned. But with that said, let's key it up. I think I still have it here. Click, click, click. So I've been watching this vehicle in the government auction. Inadvertently, I came across it because I was curious about getting a Sprinter van for, not necessarily getting a Sprinter van, but I was looking at Sprinter vans because I'll do that just as a reference point. Let's see, maybe it is down. That's interesting. It's down. So regardless, I can't show you the pictures online anyways. I'm not set up for that. So I've got a 2019 Jeep Cherokee. And it is a vehicle that is, first thing I would recommend is you have to run the VIN on these things a couple days before. The reason being is they're sold as is. There's no reconditioning on these vehicles. They're the way they sit is the way you're getting it. The problem with the way you're getting it is there's no vehicle inspection. There's no recourse. It's an auction sold as is, where is. So you have to kind of factor that into your mind and go, okay, I can't debate when I pick the vehicle up. The bumper's hanging off it. When I get it, it's hanging off it. It is what it is, right? So going to a government auction can be a little bit frightening from that standpoint. And back in the day, we're talking like a long time ago, I used to have a small little car dealership and a small little leasing company. And I would go to dealer exclusive auctions and I would go to estate auctions. Usually the government auctions, as strange as it sounds, they're not limiting. So in other words, I can't get into a dealer auction now because I don't have an OMVEC license, right? I can't really do an estate sale when it comes to vehicles that are exclusive with vehicles because, again, you need to have a dealer license. And a lot of the auctioneers, at least when you're looking at estate items, are dealing with one-offs. And they're usually dealing with cars that are weird to the market. So it's one of those things where you're not buying grandma's 2-year-old minivan. You're buying a specialty car that was tucked in the garage because it was grandpa's dream car, right? So it's a different type of market altogether. But the government auctions, you don't need to have an OMVEC license or a dealer license in Ontario to go to them, which, caveat there's a reason. So there's also some public auctions that are available as well. I should probably talk about those too. There's some hurdles with that. So getting into a government auction is sometimes a great way to get a good deal. But you have to do your homework first. So first thing is you want to run the VIN. Now, the dilemma is that to run a VIN through a Carfax, you're looking at about, let's call it $80 for the taxes, right? So, and it'll give you a pretty comprehensive report. The dilemma is that when you're looking at a government vehicle, their services are in-house. So to the most part, you won't get the vehicle report when it comes with service. So it's not going to be there because they've used an internal. So they've gone ahead and they're either doing internal billing with an independent shop, and the independent shop doesn't report, right? If they're doing it internally and they actually have a shop, in other words, this is a municipality that I'm looking at buying a car off of, and it is, where is it? It's a long drive. So we were looking at Corporation Township of South Frontenac. So we're talking a long drive from where I'm at. So they don't have a central location with some of these government auctions. So they'll be in the middle of nowhere. And if you're not aware of it, Ontario is a big province. And these little municipalities can be a nightmare to get to, especially in winter. And there's a timeline for picking these vehicles up. In other words, you can't leave it there for a week. They want it gone. Business is concluded, pick it up, right? So there's a hurdle with that as far as acquiring your vehicle. So if you're not set up to run out and grab it, and that's the other issue, running and grab it may not be an option. In other words, you might get up there and find the battery's dead. This vehicle might have been sitting for 6 months, waiting for it to kind of go through the process. With that said, 6 months in the start of winter, minus 23. If you're going further north, maybe you're minus 35. That battery could be bone dead, right? So, and then you have a lot of hurdles there. So Again, this is where the caveat is when you're looking at buying a government auction vehicle. There are a couple centralized locations, like in North York. There's a couple in, I think, Montreal has one, so they bring the vehicles there, and they're typically going to be things like RCMP vehicles, or they're going to be highway. I think highway auctions go there as well. So more heavy duty equipment and abused, like really heavy abused vehicles there. But this one came back, and I'm looking at going, so it's originally a vehicle that was used for fire services. And it is not a first response vehicle. So in other words, it doesn't have a ladder rack on it. There's no hoses in it. They're not using it to put fires out. They're using it for probably administrative. So it's going to be like your standard residential type of usage vehicle. They might throw a toolbox in the back and some kit when they're moving things around. But for the most part, this is going to be like the fire chief's car. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be a pretty straightforward runabout from that standpoint. Again, you've got no service records with it because it's all done in-house. So they don't report that. So this is going to show when you're doing a car proof report that it has no work done. So that's one thing to kind of get you a little eyes looking, because a lot of times municipalities are actually pretty decent. But when you're looking at like, it's a spin of the wheel, right? Because you never know if one place has a garage that they're servicing and they basically give them no conditions, just fix it. Maybe they've done everything for this thing. That could be the case. So it's a gamble. Or they might be in a municipality where they're having some financial issues and they're going, you know what? We're getting rid of the car in a year. Don't do anything. And that happens a lot, right? So you're getting right at the tail end of life. So this one here, 2019 Jeep Cherokee. Red. It's a neat vehicle. It's got a 2-liter turbo engine. It's got when I do a little research on it, run the VIN, it's got skid plates on it. It's got the nice alloyed wheels, a little beefier rubber. It's their trail rated vehicle. So is it the bottom line of the car, which typically when you're looking at municipalities it is? This isn't. So it's kind of one of those little things you go, well, that's kind of cool. It's not their bottom line car. Now, a couple things. Turbo. So that's a problem. On most domestics, it could be an issue. So in other words, you're taking a big gamble here. They ran a little video so you could hear the vehicle run and see that the dashboard isn't lit up. And you could kind of hear a little valve train rattle, and you can kind of hear a few little things. But you can't really do anything beyond checking. Like they don't even check fluids, right? So it could have a host of issues with it. So that's in the back of my mind. Turbo, right? Doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but it means that potentially there's some serviceability issues there. So you have to factor that in. Timing chain, which is nice on this particular vehicle, which means it should last the extent of the vehicle. The dilemma is that you do a little research on some of the Jeep stuff. You're going to find that, like every other manufacturer, guides can be a problem, tensioners can be a problem, which doesn't mean it's going to be an issue, but it's one of those things where at this kilometer range, if it hasn't had regular oil changes and service work, it's going to be an expense that might come up, right? So you have to kind of put that in your head when you're factoring in price. So I don't go with the $80 Carfax or CarProof. I don't do that. I go down to the Ministry of Ontario services and I pick up this for $20. So this is their report. And this actually is, because I'm not going to get any service response off the other one. So why pay $80? And all I really want to do is I want to confirm what the trim line is on the vehicle. So I want to confirm the VIN number is accurate. I want to have a confirmation of how the vehicle was purchased. So this was bought a year prior. So this is bought in 2018. So this is like a first run vehicle for this particular model, which means that there's some issues with it related to recalls and whether or not they've been done. Now, because I want to run this on Turo, recalls are a problem, right? So, and there's a couple there because it's Stellantis that they're not available. So if I bought this car, I may have to hold on to it indefinitely. There's no guideline to there to say, hey, no, we're going to have the parts available in 30 days. No, it could take a year. It may never even show up. So that's because they're going through some hurdles there. So that's a problem with this vehicle. Now, however, the little voice in my head goes, because it's crazy, right? So it's one of those things. If the price is right, this is a nice little buy. It's got 160,000 kilometers on it. It's not at the end of life. Everything that I research on it says these will go 200K plus. So it's not a problem from that standpoint. Tires look okay. They're not brand new, but they look like they'll pass the safety. The brakes, and when they did the walk around, you can see it through that. They look fresh. Like they're not. In Ontario, it's a really telling thing to walk in a parking lot. And if they got the nice alloyed wheels with the nice opening to it, you can look in. And if you see they're nice and brown, they look like the top of a barbecue tank. If it's been sitting for a little while, they're probably not great brakes. But these look nice and shiny. They look okay, right? So it's one of those things where I'm probably not going to get into a lot of maintenance. And if the brakes look okay, probably they've done the oil changes. Like it doesn't strike me as an issue from that standpoint. So it's worth a gamble. But here's where pricing becomes an issue, where you need to do your research. So this is a Jeep Cherokee, but they make two different versions of Jeep Cherokee. So there's a big full-size one, which is great value and a nice unit, has some hurdles too, but I would look at something like that as well if the price was decent. And this one's a little guy. So this is really a small compact SUV. It'd be like looking at an RVR, right? And that's where I was thinking of replacing the Outlander or adding an RVR in the 6 month anyway. So I thought this might be a good deal to be that RVR category. And they kind of look nice. Like they're not horrible. This one's got leather and a couple nice little items too. They kind of dress it up a little bit. But if I do a little research online, I can buy a vehicle off of a dealer for $12,995 with the safety, and it has a little more kilometers, but pretty close. Like it's in the wheelhouse of okay, right? So $12,900 gets me almost a parallel vehicle to this. A couple little differences, but pretty close for $12,900. When I run it through, let's see, what company do I like to use? So I'm using VRM Canada to assess values on vehicles, and it's coming back and it's telling me that it's worth 15 to 22, right? So on the retail end of it. So the problem with that is that's the retail number, and that's like it could be a year old reporting on it. So it's more of like don't spend more than this, like as far as that's concerned. They don't really give you a wholesale. They do, but it's wholesale. It's convoluted. So you have to do research by going on to Auto Trader, Kijiji. You need to just do a little research across Canada and find marketable examples of it, right? As far as that's concerned. So I figure 12 to 15 is kind of the retail on this. So wholesale on this one, once I kind of think, okay, I've got some risks involved. I'm going to do a turbo. Turbo's $1,800, and then I have to do the labor, right? Which it's doable because the turbo's at the front of the engine. It's going to be a bit of a hassle, but it's something that you can do in your driveway. It'll be a double weekend type of deal. But it's if it's worse, horrible, you can fix it. Timing chain, there's a couple guides. If you remove the valve cover gasket, you can get to them. It's an awkward, uncomfortable, annoying job, but it's something you can do in the vehicle. Valve cover gaskets are known to leak. Not a big deal from that thing. And again, it's got things like emission control problems. Again, all stuff that you can kind of do on the driveway without being a huge hurdle. So it's one of those vehicles I can put on that kind of hit list of maybe if the price is right. So my thoughts on this one is it's valued at about $7,500 to maybe $9,500 because I can buy one certified for $12,900. And that one shows it has a clean history and has service records with it. So really, to pay any more than that, once I put taxes on and a transfer and get the safety and do the work, I'm really close to that. Like I'm saving maybe $1,000, $1,200, right? So that's where I'm doing the research now. So I'm watching this online. I'm going, okay, well, it's a nice vehicle. It's got a couple little dings. It'd be nice to be able to show it to you, but again, I'm not set up for that. But as the auction ramps up, it's going well past the retail price. So this ended up selling for, I think, $13,700 or almost $14,000. And I think the dilemma on this one is that whoever bought it didn't know that Cherokee's in two models. Because when I run the value assessment on the quick little check to see where I would sit wholesale and retail on it, that's a great deal if it's the actual limited or a full-size Cherokee. Like that's a spectacular deal as far as that's concerned. On this little guy, it's above retail. So whoever bought that either didn't do the research on it or knows that vehicle in and out. In other words, their staff or there's somebody in that region that know the car and are prepared to step up and buy it because they like it, right? But I just thought that this is a good example of time and energy spent trying to get an auction car um, at a reasonable price, well, a competitive price. So this basically destroyed a day and a half of work. And then I would have had to go pick the vehicle up, which is a 5 hour drive, run it back down, do the safety, put the work in. So in other words, this would probably tie up money for uh, being winter, probably 6 weeks, because I have to wait for the weather to change and things along that line. So I could probably build the parts up, get the assessment, do things along that line. So it would be a fun little project to kind of work on, but you have to really look at the details. And that's where getting, again, the Ontario service pack on it is really good. Normally they'll give you an actual wholesale value. On this particular application, they didn't, because they couldn't find a comp as far as that's concerned. And what's really nice is the lady at the counter explained that to me. She said, there just isn't very many of these in Southern Ontario, so they haven't had a lot of transactions. So they can't really give you an assessed value on it. So that's fair, right, from that standpoint. And then she looked it up in the system, and then I had the exact same conflict where she's going, well, there's 2 Cherokee listings. So this could either be a limited or the full size style, which case there's price points on it. And it's, when it sold, it was almost on the dead on number on the wholesale value on the Ontario buyer's package. And I thought, well, someone must have pulled the buyer's package and then had this exact same conversation, is now taking the gamble on buying the little tiny little guy opposed to the big one, right? So I think that's where you got to do your research when it comes to that. Now, the other one is, this one will tell me whether it was an accident. A nice thing when you're looking at a municipality car, they have to report the accident. So it will come back as, it's been hit or there's been repair work done on it. It gets reported pretty clearly, actually, on these ones when you're doing municipality cars. RCMP cars, though, or anything that would be military applications, aren't. So if that little cruiser you're looking at, you're going to be really cool to buy one of those. It wouldn't. They're usually beaten to bits. If it's been, driven over the bridge and into the lake and then back out and then put back in and then driven, it's never going to show up. It's going to be one of those things you never get a pristine car along that line. So again, that's one of those little things that just years of looking at them, you kind of go, oh, that'd be nice. It's very rare to get one that doesn't have an issue attached to it. And but anyway, so that's what I was up to, looking at cars at auction. Again, there's 2 places in Ontario you can actually do auction purchases. So one is a service, which is government deals. It is a problem with that. Maybe I'll put the link down below so you can actually look at it. They bundle everything, so it's not just cars. So it's bizarre, and it's right across Canada and the U.S. So you got to be really careful when you're looking at things, because you might go, oh, that looks spectacular, I'd love to get that. Then you put a bid in, then you realize, oh, it's in Thunder Bay. Well, Thunder Bay, compared to where I am at, you might as well go to Florida. It's crazy. So just be aware of that. And I always find it's at the bottom of the listing in really tiny little letters, but you have to pick it up here. And it's never actually in the city. It's always in like some little municipality outside of that. So you think, oh, I'll go to Thunder Bay, I'll hop on a plane, boom, done, no big deal, drive it back. Don't think that. That's going to give you some problems. The other one is, oh, we've expired here. GC Surplus, which they've got a couple little spots where they actually bring the vehicles to. This one I've actually bought stuff from in the past. They're not customer oriented as far as white glove treatment. They're kind of, it's parked out back, go grab it, that type of deal. Some issues that I found when I bought product from them. They expect you to change over ownership prior to arrival. So you have to do an office visit first to get your documentation paperwork. Then you have to go to the local motor vehicle department, transfer it in as a temporary plate or as a unfit vehicle. And then they'll want it towed out if it's unfit. If they've already declared that, they'll want it towed out of their compound area because they've got liability issues attached to it. So that becomes an issue. So in other words, you've got to factor in a tow. So when you're buying a vehicle from that end of it, it's not the end of the world, but it's an additional cost you've got to factor. So you figure a tow hook to run to the local Canadian tire store. Then from there, once they drop it, you can kind of throw your plate on it and drive it, right? As long as you're insured and everything's covered, right? But it's one of those things that's an additional $100, so just be aware of that. Or today's probably 150. So just, that's one of the things to be concerned about. They do a quick little walk around, but they don't care. It's one of those things where you bought it. It is what it is. If you arrive and you find that the door is missing, that's on you. You didn't look at the photos. It's one of those things where there is no, it's done. Like, goodbye, right? So just be aware that it is really a cut and dry auction. And you know what? To be honest with you, they're really clear about it. So it's not like it's a mystery when you get there. Not like I'm going to go, oh, well, now I get to look at it and drive it and see if I want to. No, you bought it. It's yours. Done. So factor that in. So I've been looking at those because, again, I want to get into another little RVR type thing, or I want to get into a small little compact. And I've picked up some equipment that I would like to get a van for. So I've been looking for caravans or a Ford Transit that's a little older. So it's one of those things where I want something that's been in a fleet in the past, because I like to get where the cabinetry's already been installed and a couple little things that typically are fleet vehicles items. And usually if I get it through that route, if I buy the vehicle cheap enough, and this is the argument that I like to put forward, if I can get it wholesale and I can't recoup the labor. So that's one of the things you have to be kind of just say to yourself, it is what it is. But if I can get a caravan with a bad solenoid in the transmission, I can replace the solenoid, right? So that's not a big deal, but I have to factor that in. I'm just going to assume that when I'm buying the vehicle at auction, that it has a bad solenoid, because I can't drive it. So, because that's a known fault with these vehicles, or a bad transmission, I have to factor in, okay, it's got 180K on it, heavy driven, probably a bad transmission. So I need to factor in $3,000 for a transmission. I can do some of the labor on it to offset it. But again, it is what it is on that. You have to kind of be aware of that. So I've seen that a couple times where you look at a person, you kind of go, oh dear, you bought that car. You paid almost retail for it. Like, you got a savings. Like, if you're comparing to Auto Trader prices, like, yeah, it's $1,000 less, or it's $2,000. Like, I get that, but it's a gamble on these vehicles. Like, it's a real gamble. So if you get it out and you luck out and you go, oh no, everything's done, everything's perfect, it's a great car, it didn't cost me anything to service or to maintain or to get back onto the road, you're like, you got the lottery ticket there. Because most of them are going to come in and say, oh, hey Keith, just so you're aware of it, the oil pan's been nudged by something. The tires don't match, the brakes are done, the transmission doesn't shift, there's a head gasket issue, someone's already pulled the spark plugs out. It's actually happened to me once. So they've already diagnosed something and then went, oh, this is horrible, get it out of the fleet, right? So you have to kind of go, okay, well, I've got to factor these repairs in. And you have to be able to take that car that's at auction and go, I need a true auction below wholesale price to make that worth the headache. And that's where you have to watch them like religiously, like nonstop. And you kind of go, after a while, it gets to be a headache and an annoyance. Whereas if you find a nice little independent dealership, and I mean like a mom and pop place, they're going to have access to Odessa. You're going to have access to some of the dealer auctions where you can say, look, this is what I'm looking for. I'm not going to hold you to the rails on it, but I want one that's been green lighted. I want your mechanic to go through it. I'm going to pay pretty close to retail, but then there's no headaches, right? You kind of go, it's turnkey, done, and they can throw a little warranty attached to it. So you can say, okay, well, that's resolved. And if you're running a little business like a Turo operator, and you're going to break it out monthly anyways, it's probably the better bet than to go through an auction and take a gamble. So if you're a hobbyist and you feel like having a little bit of fun and you want to be able to knock it off your list and say, okay, I bought a car off auction, just like the guys down in the States, that would be like Hoovy, which one of my favorite guys to watch because he is entertaining. And he's got that nice lady friend now that does like a morning show. That's a good one too. So I'd recommend watching those. I like some of the older Hoovy stuff, like, because I'm into the older cars and some of the older wrecks. So I like running beater cars, something along. So that's always a big thing for me. His stuff on, this is where I'm ranting off a little bit. His stuff on things like Lamborghinis and top end cars, I could care less, to be honest with you. But it is entertaining to watch from that standpoint. So if it's on your bucket list to do that, then go to a government auction because there's less regulatory issues attached to it. Just remember, there's probably a reason why they're there. It's never they're never concourse or beautiful vehicles. In Ottawa, they do auction off. They run cars to confirm emission standards. So they'll have the manufacturer either, I think, as part of their process for qualifications, uh, I think they give them the car that's really, really cheap from that standpoint. It's probably one of those things where they have to give them the car. So they auction them off afterwards, but they hold them for, I think, 3 to 4 years. But they don't really drive them. So they always have like ridiculously low K. And they come through maybe once a year. Those are problematic because they've modified a few things. So you have to take the modifications off. And the other one that I found, because I had this discussion before with one of the folks, they never registered them. So they never had the NIVIS card. You probably don't know what a NIVIS card is. Why would you? But when a dealer gets a car and it's landed in Canada, they get a NIVIS card. The NIVIS card means that it meets all standards and requirements to be registered in the province that you're in or across Canada, right? You need that NIVIS card to be able to register the car to acknowledge the fact that it has landed and that it qualifies. Otherwise, when you take it in and you run the VIN, you're going to go, well, this car doesn't exist because it's not registered in the system. To go back to the manufacturer to say, hey, look, I bought this really amazing deal. It's just, but I just stole it essentially. It doesn't really happen. Just you're aware of that. Like you hear people say that, but not really. To get that NIVIS card is a bit of a battle. It's not impossible. It's not the end of the world from that standpoint, but it's going to be one of those things. If you're doing it for the first time, the forms you have to fill out and the requests you have to make, you have to know where to go, who to talk to at the dealership level or to go to the manufacturer level to get that copy. It can be a bit of a hassle. And the other one is on the occasional time, Toyota, just so you're aware of it, their cars that they put in for emission testing are cars that aren't available in Canada. They're trying to get them approved. And if they don't get approved or there's a reason why they didn't want to bring it in, and it'll sometimes be a model you go, that doesn't seem exotic. So you'll think, oh, I bought a Prius, it should be okay. But it's a variation or a VIN that isn't really remitted into Canada to begin with, so it becomes a problem. So now it's one of those things where you've got a 4 or 5 year old car with low K on it that you can't put on the road. Now you'd have to wait for the 20 years to come up to say, okay, well, now it's a Japanese import, right? So you can get it in. But it's one of those things where do you want to mothball the car for 15 years to be able to run it? So that it becomes a hurdle, or do you want to send it down to the States? It just becomes, if you're not a dealer or you're not into that type of run through, it can be a bit of a hassle from that standpoint. So there's a couple places that you'll go, oh, well, look, that looks like, and then you have to kind of dig into the background and go, oh, there's a reason why it's cheap. And it's a reason why that dealers don't go to government auctions to buy the stuff. If you were a dealer and entry to barrier in Ontario for an individual to become a dealer, I'm going to do a video about that actually. So we'll probably do a series on how to get your ONVEC license and how to actually register as a dealer or a wholesaler. It's not impossible, but by the time you put your so you're going to need a garage policy for insurance. You're going to need a bunch of other little documentations, a test to get your licensing, whole host of stuff. It's a big hurdle, so there's an expense attached to it, right? To be able to go to a small independent shop and say, look, guys, I'm a Turo operator. These are the criteria that Turo's put forward as far as the vehicles I can utilize. I need something with a good ROI attached to it, and they'll understand. Like if you're dealing with somebody who's been in the car business for a while, and you're looking for something that isn't quite perfect, like it's not like a tan Toyota Corolla. It's a cookie cutter car, right? So you're just saying, look, I want a cookie cutter car. It's got to have no accidents or some minor repair work that needs to be done. This is what I'm looking for, and this is the price range that I'm trying to get it into. And the other one that I would probably suggest to you is say, look, once it hits that 200K mark, I need to get rid of the car. So if you find a nice little independent shop, they're always looking for vehicles too. So look, I'm going to buy one at 160, which is kind of what I'm doing with the Outlander. I'm going to run it till 190, and then I'm going to sell it. Right? And if I can tell a dealer, look, I bought it off you, I'm going to rotate it out. Do you want to run it to auction at 90K, or do you want to try and retail it yourself? If you can retail it yourself, it saves me the headache and hassle. If it gets sold, I'm going to buy another car, which means we're going to sit down, go through the ADESA auctions and then figure out something to bid on and buy. or they may have a vehicle come in on trade that works for you that's better. So it's one of those things where relationships are important. So auction time, government auctions in Ontario and in Canada right across the board. For a guy that's just starting out, who's not too familiar with vehicles in general or the process of checking, I would probably stay away from them as far as that's concerned. Yes, there can be some good deals to be found there. The limit is that what appears to be a good deal initially, and again, you might want to watch a couple of those little Hoovy videos. Once it lands, if you're going to have it shipped in, once you pay for that and it lands, you're going to find that it's not going to be entirely what you anticipated. There's going to be other work attached to it, or level expectation is going to be too high, and you're going to get very disappointed with it. Whereas at least if you're going to a local private seller, you can at least test drive the car, get a feel for the background, the history of it. You can get comfortable with the car a little bit, and you can put a fair, reasonable offer together. As far as that's concerned, that won't bite you down the road, right? So that's the key thing with that one. Go to an independent dealer. They have a little lower cost of business, so they can get away with a few little things. Whereas if you went to a franchise store, they're going to sell you a trade-in that's probably have some quirks and some problems. So it's one of those things where, again, it's relationship stuff, right? But a little independent shop where you go, okay, this is what I'm looking for. Usually they can help you out, especially if you say to yourself, I don't care what color it is. I don't care option group wise. So you can go whatever's available at a great deal, because I'm going to rotate out of it. You can tell them that, say, and they'll go, oh, great. This is a car that's been sitting for 90 days. They're on a fleet program. They need to get out of it anyways. There's nothing wrong with a car that's been sitting for 90 days. It's just either it's got an unappealing color, or they've had really bad marketing, or it's a seasonal issue. Like, for instance, right now, if I had a four-wheel drive F-150 with snow tires at minus 23 with 9 inches of snow down for the American guys, I think that's what, 2,000 centimeters. So, so that car wouldn't stand on the lot for very long, even if it was mispriced. Like, it would be gone, right? So from that standpoint, so you might get into an out-of-season car, or a car that just doesn't have that curb appeal. You're going to go, okay, well, I'm going to run it for 6 months or a year on Turo. It's going to buy itself down. At that point, you can rotate out, right? But it's one of those things where it's a personal thing. I would not recommend that you go to a government auction and buy a car unless you have a lot of room to kind of negotiate, like to play with the vehicle. If you are in an environment where you can do some of your own work, and if you're in an environment, like, for instance, if I were a mechanic and I didn't want to go through the hurdles of getting an ONVAC license and the hassle on that, but I wanted something to tinker on and kind of play with for a little bit, a government auction probably would be ideal for the third-year technician or a fourth-year technician that can pull the vehicle in after hours and do a transmission service and do some repair work and run the vehicle for maybe 6 months or a year and enjoy it for a little while, then rotate back out. And there are some nice vehicles that go through government auction. So, but for that little independent guy like myself, where I'm just trying to pick up a reasonably priced car without a lot of headaches, I probably wouldn't go that route. And this is a good example of where you get excited and you kind of go, oh, well, that seems like the deal. And then you do a little research. And if I didn't check this with the VIN number, and I also ran it through my chat GTP, as far as that's kind of funny. Chat GTP even gave me a little rundown, said, hey, watch out for this, because there's 3 packages within this small vehicle. The top package with the V6 is actually a good buy. It's a 3.6 liter, so it has some known issues, but it's a good established market for it. It's a commodity. In other words, if you've got a dark gray or a black one, it's worth X amount. It's going to move quickly because it's a commodity-based vehicle. If you get in the 2-liter turbo in fire engine red, because it's from the fire department, it's not a commodity-based vehicle. It's going to be somebody who's going to look and go, it's got the trail-rated package on it. It's got the nice tires. It's a toy, right? So it narrows that market down a fair bit on what you can sell it for or where you can sell it. So that's one of the things that you need to look at. So again, that's me ranting, where I'm just talking about auctions as far as what I've been up to. So if you're out there looking to buy a car for Turo, would I go into an auction environment? Probably not. I would probably avoid it. There's the market is competitive. Again, you can actually go out and find a better deal. So as far as that's concerned. So hopefully that helps you out. We're at 45 minutes. I always try to shoot these for 30, and I always seem to go over a little bit. So again, If you can subscribe, that would be great. Have a pleasant and enjoyable day. We'll go and stream. Oh, not quite yet. Bye.